phone hummed on the counter like a trapped insect, and I stared until the screen woke and showed a name I did not know. I opened the thread, and my stomach dropped when the words glowed like sirens. Emma said, "Liam, who is Riley, and why does she miss your mouth?" I heard the lock click, and the door sighed as he stepped in, and the rain behind him made a curtain of noise. Liam said, "It's work, you were overreading." The lie was soft and practiced, and it slid across my skin like cold metal. I put the phone on the island and watched his eyes drag to it and freeze. Emma said, "Say it again and watch it break you." He tried a crooked smile, the one that usually warns me, and it looked borrowed. A voice memo pinged and a whisper bled out. "I don't think he'll ever find out." Silence swallowed the room, heavy as wet wool. Emma said, "I heard everything." He reached for me, and I stepped back, breath shallow and hot. The clock on the wall ticked like it wanted the courage I lacked. Emma said, "Tell me the truth, or I will burn this house of stories down." The apartment held its breath while I folded into the couch and counted the holes in the knit, trying to find a version of today that didn't exist. Emma said, "You lied with your whole mouth, and I loved you with my whole life." The heater thumped, and the clock crawled, and I replayed the whisper until it sanded my ribs raw. Liam said, "We can fix this." It was a moment. It meant nothing. The word nothing scraped like gravel. I thought of birthdays and rent splits and road trips that were now props in a set built for a stranger. Emma said, "You emptied our future to fill your ego." He started to pace, and the shadow of his strides crossed my knees like a metronome for panic. My phone buzzed again, and I let it scream into the room. Emma said, "I will not carry your lie for one more second." The rain slowed, and the silence after felt like someone had put the city on mute. The memory arrived uninvited and sugar-sweet, a summer deck and cheap lemonade, and his laugh before it became a trick. Emma said, "You promised me a life with roots and rain and room to grow." Liam poured more lemonade and kissed my forehead in that scene, and I believed a forever that didn't mind the weeds. Jordan said, "He looks at you like you're the sun," and I mistook awe for devotion. We danced to a song that now sounds like a warning I ignored. Emma said, "I memorized the way your hand found mine in crowds." The past glowed like a filter that I kept using to hide the cracks in the present. I wanted to smash it, and I wanted to crawl back inside it. Emma said, "Was I loving a mask while the face was somewhere else?" The memory slipped, and the deck boards turned back into my living room floor. I opened the drawer where we stash receipts, and found a parking stub that did not belong to our life. 2 nights ago, a boutique hotel we never visited. Emma said, "You were working late in a lobby with turned-down service." My fingers shook, and the paper fluttered like a wounded moth. Liam said, "It was a client dinner. The valet was closer. Calm down." Calm down is a match thrown at gasoline. I searched the bank app and saw a bar charge that lined up like teeth with the timestamp. Emma said, "You gave yourself away and called it chance." The air thinned, and I pulled in shallow gulps that tasted like tin. I felt the room tilt and brace, like a ship taking on water. Emma said, "Tell me her last name." He looked at the ceiling and found no mercy there. The truth dragged its chair toward us and sat down. I took a breath that scraped, then another, and built a spine out of the shards on the counter. Emma said, "I will not drown where I can stand." I opened a notes file and started a timeline, dates, places, alibis, gaps that glared like missing teeth. Jordan called and I let the ring settle, then picked up. Jordan said, "I'm here, say the word and I'll come over." Emma said, "I need proof, not comfort yet." My hands steadied as the pattern formed a noose around the story he kept selling. Liam said, "This is cruel. Stop digging." The word cruel snapped in half in my mouth. Emma said, "I am digging to bury this lie." The rain finally quit, and the city exhaled, and I felt my pulse return to a rhythm that belonged to me. I saved the file and named it what it was, The End of Pretending. Emma sat at the edge of her bed with the window cracked, letting in the sound of cars sighing by, and the night felt like it was pressing its weight into her chest. Emma said, "I used to think love was armor. Now it's a wound I keep pressing." Her phone glowed with old photos, smiles that no longer lived in the present. She traced the screen until her fingertip burned with memory. Liam's laugh echoed in her head, a ghost too loud to ignore. She pulled the blanket tighter and stared at the ceiling where the plaster lines looked like scars. Emma said, "I gave him every part and he chipped away until I could not see myself." The silence in the room was violent, like it wanted her to scream. She closed her eyes and felt her breath stumble, uneven. The betrayal had made her a stranger in her own life. She whispered, "Who am I if not his partner? What am I if not his choice?" The morning sun crept through thin curtains and painted the room in dull gold, but Emma did not move until her alarm buzzed for the third time. She dragged herself up and stared into the bathroom mirror. Emma said, "This is the face of someone who believed too much." Her eyes were swollen, red rims telling a story she had not yet spoken aloud. She splashed water, cold, hoping to shock the ache away. Liam's toothbrush stood beside hers, the bristles fanned, a reminder of routines that mocked her. She pushed it aside and watched it clatter into the sink. Emma said, "I can't erase you yet, but I can move you out of my sight." The mirror fogged from the hot water, and she traced a shaky line through it, clearing space for her reflection. Emma said, "I will find myself even if I have to carve through the smoke." The cafe hummed with low chatter, clinking cups and the hiss of milk steaming, but Emma sat small in the corner booth, waiting. Jordan slid in across from her, eyes sharp, smile soft. Jordan said, "You look like you carried a storm here." Emma said, "He lied until the truth slapped me awake." She pushed the phone across the table, the messages bright like wounds. Jordan read with lips pressed tight, then looked up with fury breaking through the calm. Jordan said, "You deserve more than this hollow game he plays." Emma wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, needing the warmth to stitch her back together. Emma said, "I feel stupid, like I built a house with no walls." Jordan leaned forward, steady and sure. Jordan said, "You are not stupid, you are loyal. Don't confuse the two." The coffee cooled, but Emma's words boiled as Jordan listened. Emma said, "I keep asking what I missed, how I failed him." Her voice cracked, but her spine stayed upright. Jordan said, "Stop carrying his crime as your guilt." He tapped the table once, firm, like punctuation. Emma stared at the ripples in her untouched glass of water. Emma said, "He took every kind word I gave and fed it to someone else." Jordan leaned closer, whispering like it might steady her. Jordan said, "You have to decide whether to heal or to chase his shadow." The cafe faded, their corner holding its own storm. Emma said, "I am not ready to forgive, but I am ready to fight for myself." Emma walked back through the streets, the wind tugging her hair, the city alive but distant. She scrolled her notes app where the timeline grew, each entry a nail in the coffin of what she once called love. Emma said, "This is not weakness, this is evidence." The buildings loomed tall, glass catching sun, cold reflections staring back. Her chest felt lighter with each step, though her heart still ached. Jordan's words replayed, armor she didn't know she could wear. Emma said, "I will not be defined by the one who broke me." A bus roared past and she caught her reflection in the window, looking more like a survivor than a victim. Emma said, "He will not recognize me when I am done rebuilding." She slid her phone into her pocket, lifted her chin, and let the wind carry her forward. The night stretched thin as Liam began arriving after midnight with his tie loosened and excuses polished. Emma said, "Your calendar says budget review, your shirt says late bar." He laughed too quickly and kissed the air beside her cheek. The apartment smelled of rain and cologne that wasn't theirs. Emma scrolled the call log and counted gaps that used to be goodnight. Liam said, "You're spiraling, it's quarter close, relax." The word relax snapped like dry twigs. She watched his eyes when the phone buzzed and saw the flinch he couldn't hide. Emma said, "If it's work, answer on speaker." He smiled and silenced it with his palm like a magic trick. The clock crawled while her heart drummed a warning she had learned to ignore. Emma said, "I want the truth before the truth hunts me." He stared at the window as if the sky could gift him a script. Morning came with brittle light and a coffee taste that felt like metal. Emma said, "Your mileage report says Southside. Your card says Uptown Lounge." He shrugged and reached for jokes that landed like stones. Liam said, "I grabbed a rideshare and met a client. Stop interrogating me." She set the receipts down like puzzle pieces that refused to lie. Emma said, "Clients do not whisper at midnight and hide their face." He straightened, shoulders lifted, voice gentled into a practiced calm. Liam said, "You're hurt, and you're seeing ghosts." She felt the ghost move a chair in her chest. The room shrank as their words circled and scraped. Emma said, "I will not be handled." He rolled his eyes and reached for his keys like a curtain call. The door clicked, and the silence felt like a verdict. The city's evening wind cut sharp as Emma followed a thread she could no longer ignore. A calendar ping nudged her toward a street that glowed with hotel signage and wet pavement. She stood beneath an awning and watched the lobby doors breathe. Liam entered with a woman whose laugh rang bright and careless. Emma said, "I don't want this to be real, but it is walking under the same light as me." She lifted her phone with hands that refused to shake. Riley slipped her arm through his, and they vanished behind mirrored glass. A valet ticket flashed in Liam's fingers like a confession. Emma said, "You taught me to notice the small things and they will bury you." A bus huffed past and threw her reflection back at her, steady and pale. She took 3 photos and saved them twice. The night felt colder, but her mind felt clean. She met Jordan 2 blocks away where the street lamp hummed, and the air smelled like wet stone. Jordan said, "Tell me everything and don't apologize for any of it." She showed the photos and watched anger tighten his jaw. Emma said, "I needed proof so my heart wouldn't gaslight my head." He nodded and breathed slow like a metronome she could borrow. Jordan said, "You need copies, a witness, and a plan that protects you." The list steadied her spine and cooled the shaking in her wrists. Emma said, "I don't want revenge, I want clarity." He pointed to the timestamp and smiled without joy. Jordan said, "Clarity loves receipts." She laughed once, and it didn't sound like her, but it didn't hurt. The city buzzed and felt less hostile. She tucked the phone away and stood taller. The next day, Emma built a quiet net with careful hands and ruthless calm. She backed up photos, exported messages, and labeled folders with dates that refused to blur. Emma said, "If the truth is heavy, let it be organized." She called her building to confirm guest logs and learned how absence writes its own entries. Jordan said, "Document first, confront later." She practiced breathing until the room stopped tilting. A calendar alert invited her to a downtown bistro that matched a charge from last week. Emma said, "If he lies, the walls will not." She reserved a corner table and planned to watch, not speak. Afternoon slid into amber, and the plan felt like a key fitting its lock. Emma said, "I choose the story where I stop doubting what I see." She closed the laptop and tucked her courage in her coat. Emma sat at the bistro corner table with the hum of lunch chatter washing over her. She watched Liam walk in, his tie perfect, his phone clutched like armor. He scanned the room before sliding into a booth across from Riley. Emma said, "You didn't even pick shadows, you picked daylight." Riley leaned close, laughter spilling too easily. Liam touched her wrist, the kind of touch that used to steady Emma's storms. Her stomach tightened as she documented the scene, every smile carved into proof. Emma said, "Love should never have to hide, yet yours performs in public." She fought the urge to stand, to scream, to make the walls testify. Instead, she sipped her coffee, hands trembling only once. Liam whispered something that made Riley's cheeks bloom red. Emma pressed record. She thought, the truth is louder when it isn't Hours later, the apartment felt too small for the storm Emma carried home. She laid the photos across the table, like evidence in a trial. Liam came in, jacket still sharp, but his face shifted when he saw the spread. Emma said, "I don't need your words, I have the truth framed in pixels." He tried to laugh, reaching for bravado, but his hand trembled against his thigh. Liam said, "This is twisted, spying like this." Emma's voice cracked, but stayed steady. Emma said, "I was not spying, I was surviving." His eyes darted, searching for a script that had burned to ash. The silence throbbed louder than shouting. The walls seemed to lean closer, listening. Emma pressed the phone, and the sound of Riley's laugh filled the room, sharp as shattered glass. Liam snatched at the phone, but Emma's hand slammed down first, the sound echoing like a gavel. Emma said, "Don't you dare touch the only honesty left between us." His chest rose fast, his composure cracked. Liam said, "It was a mistake, nothing more." Emma's laugh broke sharp and bitter. Emma said, "Mistakes don't book hotels and stroke wrists." He sagged into the chair, words collapsing before reaching her. The ring of Riley's laugh replayed from the speaker, and he buried his face in his hands. Emma felt heat in her veins, fury braided with grief. Emma said, "You rehearsed your lies, while I rehearsed our vows." The air thickened, time warped. He looked up finally, tears glassing his eyes, but she saw no confession, only fear of loss. Emma stood, spine straight, words finally catching up with her breath. Emma said, "Tell me her name without choking." He hesitated, lips forming shapes, but no sound. Liam said, "It doesn't matter, it's over." Emma stepped closer, fury cooling into clarity. Emma said, "It matters because it was built on my trust." The apartment seemed to pulse, every detail louder. Clock ticks, fridge hum, the weight of betrayal filling air. He whispered Riley, like the name itself had cut him open. Emma blinked once, long and slow, her pulse quiet but sharp. Emma said, "So it has a name, a face, and the blood of my life wrapped inside it." He lowered his eyes, and the ground between them split in two. The revelation sank heavy, and Emma felt her chest empty, replaced with a hollow clarity. She moved toward the window, looking at the rain streaks smearing the city glow. Emma said, "Every lie you told now belongs to me as truth." Liam rose slowly, reaching, but stopped when she stiffened. Emma said, "Do not touch me, not with those hands." His arm dropped, silence his only answer. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, grounding herself against the world still turning outside. Emma said, "You built love on sand and called it a home, but I see the tide." The city lights blurred like tears, but her voice carried steel. Emma whispered, "This is where I stop being yours." Behind her, he slumped deeper into his shadow, and she stayed tall in the glow of fractured light. Emma replayed Riley's name in her head like a needle skipping on vinyl. She searched social profiles, and the face leapt from the screen. Someone not unknown, but painfully close. Emma said, "You picked from the circle I trusted." Riley had been at dinners, laughing with them both, a shadow she mistook for a friend. The betrayal thickened, double-edged and merciless. Emma said, "You weren't just lying to me, you were carving me open with someone who wore my trust." She saved the screenshots, and her breath hitched as clarity tightened its grip. Liam's voice floated from the hallway, asking about dinner, as if the world had not collapsed. Emma said, "You will choke on your normal while I carry the truth." The walls seemed to shift, and she felt the ground split wider, forcing her to choose survival over silence. The next morning, Emma called Jordan, voice steady, though her fingers shook around the mug. Emma said, "It's not a stranger, it's Riley, the one who smiled at our table." Jordan swore under his breath, silence falling heavy after. Jordan said, "That cuts deeper than bone, you need to guard yourself." She laid the evidence across the counter, each detail sharper than the last. Emma said, "I don't want pity, I want protection." He leaned forward through the line, a promise carried in his tone. Jordan said, "Then we play this smart with your head, not your heart." The world outside the window buzzed, ordinary and cruel in its indifference. Emma felt her chest tighten, but inside the fracture, she sensed a sliver of steel forming. That evening, Emma confronted Liam with photos of Riley, her voice cutting sharp. Emma said, "You brought her into my life like a friend, and built your lies under my roof." His face drained, mouth parting as if air betrayed him too. Liam said, "It wasn't supposed to mean anything, it just happened." Emma laughed bitterly, shaking her head. Emma said, "Accidents don't attend birthdays, don't toast anniversaries." He reached for her wrist, but she pulled away. Emma said, "You broke more than vows. You broke the trust that made me human." The silence pressed thick, the ticking clock hammering each second into their ribs. Liam sagged into the couch, words failing him as the weight of his ruin grew louder than his excuses. Emma felt fury harden into something sharper. She turned and faced him with a stillness that carried weight. Emma said, "You used her face to fool me, but I will not be fooled anymore." Liam said, "You're twisting it, you're making it worse than it is." She leaned closer, eyes unblinking. Emma said, "No, you made it worse when you smiled at me while holding her hand in your pocket." His chest heaved, words scraping but empty. She whispered low, each syllable cold. Emma said, "Every second of this will be remembered, not buried." The air between them burned heavy, the silence louder than rage. The room no longer felt like home. It felt like evidence, waiting to be sealed. The next morning, Emma packed her bag with deliberate motions, the sound of zippers crisp as verdicts. Liam stood by the door, voice cracked. Liam said, "Don't leave, I can fix this." Emma said, "You can't fix what you never meant to keep whole." He reached for her suitcase, but she yanked it free, her grip unshaken. Emma said, "You wanted novelty, now live with the ashes of routine." The air hung with a silence that begged for mercy, but she refused to grant it. She pulled her coat on and opened the door, light spilling into the hallway. Emma said, "I am not your secret. I am not your possession. I am gone." She stepped out, each footfall heavy with freedom. Behind her, his broken breath filled the hollow apartment. Emma returned to the apartment one last time, the storm of her choices heavy in her chest. Liam stood in the center of the room, eyes hollow, words spilling in fragments. Liam said, "I can explain, if you'll listen." Emma said, "You've explained nothing but lies, and now I'm done hearing them." He moved closer, shoulders shaking, desperation clinging to him. Liam said, "It was weakness, it wasn't love." Emma's voice steadied like a blade. Emma said, "Weakness does not climb into another bed." His hands reached for air, his face pale as stone. She felt her heart slam, grief and fury locking into clarity. Emma said, "This is the last time I let you poison my breath." Silence pressed hard, broken only by the rain outside tapping like fists on glass. Liam grabbed the photo frame from the shelf, shaking as he held up their smiling faces from a summer long gone. Liam said, "Remember this, we were happy once." Emma's gaze pierced through the memory, her lips trembling but strong. Emma said, "You murdered those smiles with your hands." He slammed the frame down on the table, glass shattering into tiny stars. The sound echoed through the apartment like a final bell. Emma said, "Your anger does not erase your guilt." His chest heaved, his jaw locked, and still he had no defense that could save him. She picked up a shard and set it on the counter, a sharp symbol of what remained. Emma said, "You broke us, and you cannot unbreak me." Her words cut sharper than glass itself. Emma stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. Emma said, "You begged me to build a life with you, and then you dug a grave for it." Liam's face contorted, torn between sorrow and pride. Liam said, "I didn't plan for this, it just spiraled." She leaned in, her eyes burning with clarity. Emma said, "You planned every lie, every excuse, every alibi." His lips quivered, his defenses crumbling. For the first time, she saw him small, a man cornered by the truth. Emma said, "I loved you enough to lose myself, but I found me again in the wreckage you left." The words hung like thunder in the air, undeniable, final. Liam sagged into silence, his pride extinguished. The sound of Emma's phone recording broke the silence as she pressed the button, voice steady. Emma said, "Say her name, say Riley, and own what you did." Liam froze, his breath stuttering, eyes darting to the glowing screen. Liam said, "Stop, you don't need to drag this out." Emma said, "The truth deserves to be spoken." He whispered Riley, soft as if confessing to the dark itself. The sound sank into the phone, captured forever. Emma said, "Now the lies have no place to hide." His shoulders collapsed, as though the weight crushed him from within. She held the phone steady, her hand unshaking for the first time. Emma closed her notebook, the timeline complete, the evidence irrefutable. She looked at Liam one final time, and her voice carried the weight of every broken night. Emma said, "You will remember this silence after my words stop." He staggered back, lost in his own ruin. Liam said, "You'll regret this." Emma's eyes hardened, cold as stone. Emma said, "No, I regret trusting someone who threw me away." She grabbed her suitcase from the corner, its wheels rattling across the floor like the sound of endings. The rain had stopped, and the city hummed beyond the glass, alive and waiting. She whispered, "This is where I leave you behind." She opened the door, and the light of the hallway cut through the dim apartment like judgment itself. Morning found me in Jordan's spare room where the light felt honest. I lay still and listened to a city that did not know my name. Emma said, "I am more than what he threw away." My chest rose slow and did not break. I opened the notes file and wrote rules I would keep. Emma said, "No contact until I want closure, not chaos." I listed therapy, savings, a new lock, and a new key. The quiet did not feel like punishment anymore. Emma said, "I will not audition for love again." I breathed through the ache and felt it loosen. I placed my phone face down and chose not to read the last message. Emma said, "Today belongs to me, even if it trembles." The light moved across the floor like a path I could walk. I met him in the lobby because our home could not hold us anymore. He held the spare keys like they might beg for mercy. Liam said, "Please talk to me without the armor." Emma said, "Armor is what you made necessary." I placed a folder on the counter with copies and dates. The manager watched with quiet professionalism and opened doors. Liam said, "I'm losing everything and you are smiling." Emma said, "I am breathing." He reached for my hand and found air. I signed the transfer forms with a steady line. Emma said, "You will not call me tonight or tomorrow." His mouth worked around a word that never arrived. The elevator chimed and the moment ended. In the afternoon, Jordan helped me box what was mine and only mine. He labeled each carton with a neat hand that steadied me. Jordan said, "You are not a ruin, you are a rebuild." Emma said, "I believed him more than I believed me." He passed me bubble wrap like a ritual. Jordan said, "Belief returns when you feed it truths." I stacked memories without letting them crush me. Emma said, "Some things can come, some things must stay." We laughed once at a photo that had lost its power. The laugh sounded brave and not broken. Jordan said, "When it hurts again, call me and I will answer." Emma said, "I will." The room felt lighter than the boxes. I saw Riley across a cafe window, eyes down, shoulders pinched. She looked smaller than the noise she made in my life. Riley said, "He told me you were ending." Emma said, "He told me forever." Her mouth trembled and no defense appeared. Emma said, "I don't need your apology to heal." She nodded like someone learning a new language. Riley said, "I was wrong." Emma said, "So was I, and now I am done being wrong." The cups clinked, and a song I loved returned without warning. I felt the ache and let it pass through. We stood in separate lights and did not step closer. At dusk I returned for one last thing, a book with my handwriting in its margins. He stood by the shelf like a ghost practicing lines. Liam said, "Say there is a road back." Emma said, "There is a road, but it does not loop." He tried a smile that broke before it reached me. I took the book and the silence that came with it. The window showed a city that kept moving, and it felt like permission. I walked to the door and paused long enough to breathe. Emma said, "You didn't think I'd ever find out, did you?" The handle felt cool and honest in my palm. I stepped into the hall and closed the past behind me.